Okay, in our last video, Silver, a proper foundation for buying, I said we'd get into the product line a little bit more and what to buy. So invariably people come in, they're new, they're again at that confused state. You get them past the idea that, yeah, this is a good idea and here's why, and then it comes down to what product. So we try to keep things really simple. My wife had an expression one time, and she said, buying silver is not rocket science. And I thought, yeah, it really isn't. It's brain surgery. No, it's neither, actually. It's really simple. And we also jokingly, between us, we say silver is silver. I mean, at the end of the day, it's metal. And there's not much difference between one company's bars and another in terms of the metal. It all comes from refineries. They all basically do the same thing to process it out. Its purity is basically the same. And at the end of the day, if it's pretty much pure, like 99.9% pure, I mean, that's as close as it needs to be unless you're using it for medical purposes. Then it needs to be a little bit more pure. So from an investment standpoint, 99.939s metal is perfectly good. Yes, there are some 49s metals out there. Doesn't make a whole lot of difference in investing terms. So anybody that tells you the 49s concept is important, well, I take it with a bit of, I wouldn't put a lot of stock in it. Let's put it that way. Nothing wrong with it. If you like 49's product and you want to pay the extra premium for it, hey, that's your decision. But this is an area where I often talk to people about getting your best value. So how do we get our best value? Yes, certainly government mint product like the Royal Canadian Mint Maples and the 100-ounce bars from RCM and their 10-ounce bars as well. Yes, there are some advantages to those bars, but I believe that for the average person, those advantages don't justify the extra cost. Now, the advantage to government mint, yes, recognizability, of course, but I think part of this recognizability factor hinges on the premise that at some point down the road, we're going to go into apocalypto mode, the Mad Max scenario that everybody talks about, and it's going to be panic in the streets, and people are going to be trading their silver out in the streets. So the recognizability factor of the Royal Canadian Mint product will help them, persuade somebody to take, a coin from them. And I just don't believe there's any merit to that. I mean, let's face it, the silver investing market's a small group of people in relative terms. And yeah, I just find that most people are completely oblivious and unaware in the general population. I don't think that's about to change anytime soon. So the merit in having more quote unquote recognizable product, recognizable to who? Other silver purchasers? Well, other silver purchasers will probably recognize just about anything that's a legitimate name brand product in the market. And I mean, this is what most places carry, including us. So I'll give you a couple of examples here. Now, let me back up a sec. The one advantage to owning government mint product is that it's recognized around the world. Some of the mints that we commonly are familiar with, for example, Sunshine Mint, we handle a lot of Sunshine Mint. Reason, good price. That's why we carry it. And recognizable. But is it recognizable around the world, like say in Great Britain or Australia? Well, I don't know. I've never checked, but I tend to think it probably isn't. It's more of a North American phenomenon. So let's say you're a world traveler, you're planning on moving abroad maybe someday, or think that eventuality might come up. Yes, government mint for that reason would be probably a better choice. But I think that's probably where it ends. Quality-wise, I just don't see any difference. If you want to pay the extra premium for the government mint, that's perfectly fine. But let me give you some suggestions here to save you a little bit on premium. For example, in 1 ounce terms, 1 ounce generic rounds, and when I say generic, these are, and why do we call them rounds? That's another question. Okay, we'll get into both that. Why generic and why rounds? Well, generic simply means, again, we have to create a legal distinction. The government mint has the legal right to call their coins coins. They have a face value. For example, the Royal Canadian Maple is is $5 face value, and it is called a coin legally. Now, let's, for example, say the Sunshine Mint rounds that we carry. Again, there's 4 different Sunshine Mint rounds. The reason they have to be called a round is it's a legality. They can't be called a coin because they don't have the government issue stamp of approval. But they're still 1 ounce of silver. They all weigh the same, and they're substantially less money. For example, right now, I pull up our numbers on our server here, and this particular time, I think it's March 25th. It's about 8 o'clock at night. And a Royal Canadian Mint Maple is $24.43. A generic round from Sunshine Mint, any one of the 4 rounds we carry the traditional Buffalo round with the buffalo one side and the Indian head on the other, the Morgan round, the standard Sunshine Mint round, and the Liberty round. All really nice rounds. And right now they're $22.85 each for 1 ounce. So compare there, $24.43 for a maple, $22.85 for a round. That's about $1.40 savings an ounce. That's pretty substantial. Now, if you like something a little bit more robust, 10-ounce bars are really popular. And so again, we carry primarily 2 10-ounce bars. We carry the RCM. We carry a small quantity of them because we still have people that really believe in them and they're willing to pay the extra for them. But and we also carry the Sunshine Mint. Now, by comparison, the Sunshine Mint bar right now is $227.45. The Royal Canadian Mint is $239.31. It's quite a bit of savings, $12 there. So that can add up if you're just buying a few. Well, I guess it really doesn't make that much difference. But if you're planning on building a collection long term, that $12 savings each can really add up. Now, if you're really looking at buying large amounts, I mean, I often say to people, you might not want to start off buying big 100-ounce bars, but if you're planning on buying long term in large amounts, at a certain point after you've collected up some 1 ounce, maybe 5 ounce, 10-ounce bars, you might want to consider putting a fair amount into 100-ounce bars. And here's an example of why. For example, if you were to buy 10 RCM 10-ounce bars, that would be $2,393.31 right now. So $23.93. Whereas if you bought a 100-ounce RCM bar, it would be $22.14. That's literally like, what's the math on that here? So we got $23.93. Get the calculator out. Minus, should be able to do this in my head by now, but sorry. It's $179. That's $1.79 an ounce savings. Now, even if you went with the less expensive Sunshine Mint rounds, 10 of those equaling 100 ounces would be $22.74. So if you subtract $22.14 for a 100-ounce bar, 14, you see a $60 savings still. So 60 cents an ounce. That can add up over the long term. So if you're thinking on piling on, 100 more rounds, 100 more rounds, 100 more rounds, enough for that $60 savings, or 10 more 10-ounce bars, for that savings you might want to consider going to 100-ounce bars. Now I can understand, some people down the road they're looking at, okay, when I'm ready to cash in, I don't want to have too much big product because that forces me into a position where I've got to cash in a lot at one time. Like, let's say silver doubles in price and you got 100-ounce bars, they're going up for $4,500. It's an awful lot at one time. Granted, what it really comes down to is what you plan on for the future for your collection. If you plan on collecting 5,000 ounces or 10,000 ounces, then, well, that's another conversation. I might actually start to talk to you about collecting gold. But let's just say, for example, you want to collect 3,000 ounces of silver. Sorry, I'm stammering here. 2,000 or 3,000 ounces of silver. Then, yeah, you might want to consider a fairly good bulk of that in 100-ounce bars. That's a substantial amount of weight that you're dealing with there, and just in terms of all this loose product in 10-ounce bars or in tubes of rounds could really add up to a lot of bulk. So it really it isn't, when we say buying bullion isn't rocket science. I don't think it's necessary to get it that complicated. Just think in practical terms. How much am I going to buy? How much is this going to weigh? How much bulk? How much room? How much loose product do I really want? And that really just comes down to when it's time to liquidate it later on, what that's going to look like in, physical terms. How am I going to transport this? Maybe for that reason you don't want 100-ounce bars. Maybe you don't like carrying something around that bulky and heavy, feel insecure about it, and that's fine too. Maybe the 1-ounce rounds, because of their reasonably low cost, or the 10-ounce bars would be a better bet. So really, it's not a long conversation. It's a pretty basic thing. Now, if you're looking at really, really large amounts, like if you're talking about 100,000 plus, and there's a fair number of people out there doing those kind of numbers. At a certain point, when you've collected enough silver, it might be at that point time to talk about buying gold. And this is another question we get a lot: silver, gold, which? And I say, well, on a really basic level, if you look at buying gold, let's say you got a couple $100 to invest a month, or let's say $300, and you come in and you're looking at, a little 5-gram bar is around $260, $280, maybe even $300 right now. Whereas a 10-ounce silver bar, is running around, what did I say, $227. So they're relatively close in price, but when you compare the size, this tiny little bar that's, slightly bigger than a large thumbnail, compared to, a 10-ounce bar that's like the size of a pack of dentine gum, it just psychologically, it feels like you're getting more for your money. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the same thing. And the premiums on the gold and silver are generally about the same. So it's a personal choice for small amounts. When you get into large amounts, the practicality of just having, when you start jokingly, I had one client that I said, how many pounds do you have now? And he starts saying, well, I got 200 pounds. I think it's time to start buying some gold. And I agree. At a certain point, how much bulk do you want to have laying around? I mean, just storage factor. If you're paying to store it, absolutely. Like paying to store the product. Let's say you got a safe deposit box and you're storing it there. Certainly, one safe deposit box and you're talking a couple 100 pounds of silver might not cut it. So really, in practicality terms, you might want to consider in investing at gold after a certain point. Of course, again, it comes down to if you're talking large amounts. So those are some things to think about. Again, none of this is really that complicated. Don't let people on the internet with all their wild ideas fill your head with all kinds of crazy thoughts. The one remaining thing that I'll discuss is, again, we're talking about premium. I'm trying to save my customers as much money as I can. Every dollar you save, that dollar can go towards a few more ounces. It's a game of ounces. You're trying to get as many ounces as you can. So one final note is on collector coins and all these various different fancy products that are out there now, like they have 5-ounce shotgun shells and tombstones and all these wild things. It's okay to buy a few of those things. Once you've built up a bulk of your collection in basic standard stuff, rounds and 10-ounce bars and 100-ounce bars or whatever else. Nothing wrong with owning a few of those things. I mean, let's face it, it is a collection. Part of it is a fun thing to do. I mean, on one side it is serious. It's about our finances, but it is fun. And the products are quite beautiful, some of them. So, don't be afraid to splurge once in a while and buy a few of those things. But I would say, limit it down to a few percent. Don't get carried away with, collector coins and all these other glamorous things like I just described. The premiums on them are quite high. Like 10 ounces in those silver shotgun shells would be nearly $300 right now, as opposed to $230 roughly for a 10-ounce bar. So that premium is a bit steep. Yeah, they're fun to look at, and and so on and so forth. But I say stick with the tried and true, keep it simple. And that's part of the reason we keep a fairly simple product line, is we believe in getting people the best bang for the buck. So there's some more things to think about. Like I said, don't let the internet confuse you with all the crazy ideas that are out there. Stick with the sound advice and keep